What's good, Tesla family? It's Ray J back with another video, and this one will break down what's going on with Tesla stock, what you should be watching for tomorrow, as we have some big bank earnings coming out, how the big bank earnings may affect the whole market, what the data is suggesting and the news is saying about Tesla, and how all of this may affect SPY, Tesla, Nvda, the QQQ, and many tickers out there. Before breaking things about all this information, though, before I talk about the technical analysis side and what the data is suggesting, I do have to mention a couple of things before starting. Firstly, I am not a financial planner, so take none of this as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out the Webull link, which is down below and in the description. If you sign up for Webull, the link down below, and deposit any amount of money into the account, you are guaranteed up to 12 free stocks. The offer ends very soon, so check it out before they run out. With that out of the way, let's get on with the video. Tesla was up 2.17% for the day, getting a pretty decent green day as the market held up quite nicely. Tesla started off a little bit weak, actually dropping into open instead of like getting a nice pump like it has done before. Then Tesla ended up dropping to about $270 exactly, forming a nice double bottom before this thing started to reverse. And as the market started to pump quite nicely, we saw Tesla follow the trend and push all the way up to almost 280. So it came very close to one of our targets from yesterday. This time it happened today, and Tesla is doing quite well so far. From a technical standpoint, Tesla is looking quite bullish. You could actually draw out these trend lines and see this nice bullish break. But for confirmation, we want to see Tesla establish a lower high and then start uptrending from here. Overall, it's getting very close to doing so. We have a possible inverse head and shoulders structure that has a slanted overall area. And in my opinion, there's a good chance Tesla could start to fill this gap that formed all the way up here in the 280s. However, before that happens, before Tesla really makes a big move, here's how I'm seeing Tesla in a nutshell. Basically, tomorrow is going to be less predictable because we have big earnings. I'm not expecting like the too much crazy price action or anything too huge. I don't know exactly how it's going to move, so I'm going to be very cautious. That's why I'm not really expecting anything like in particular. If anything, I'm just going to react to the bank earnings. But then after that, we have Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. All the closes are going to be coming before Tesla's earnings on Wednesday after the market closes. That's going to be right here where this yellow line is. Regardless of what happens tomorrow, whether Tesla drops or not, it does not matter because as we approach next week, we're going to see a big surge in volume and lots of buying pressure, and Tesla has potential to start squeezing to the upside to much higher levels, in my opinion. I think there's a good chance it's going to happen next week on Monday through Wednesday, right before earnings happens after the market closes on Wednesday. So I just want to make that clear. I'm very bullish for next week for Tesla. That's what tends to happen historically. But tomorrow could lead to some upside. Really depends on the bank earnings. But like I said before, it's not going to be as impactful compared to next week. So with that said, let's talk about the earnings. What's actually happening with the bank earnings? So we have JP Morgan Chase. We have Citi, Wells Fargo, PNC, and BlackRock all reporting earnings for tomorrow before the market opens. This is very important because the banks are going to be dictating the finance sector of the entire stock market, and it's going to dictate how the market moves for tomorrow. The thing about this is it's not just about earnings, it's going to be about guidance as well. So it's not just about how the banks do on beating EPS and revenue. The market's going to be just as, if not more, concerned about how on earth will their earnings look for the next few couple of months, maybe for next few quarters, for the next year. All of that's going to be very important when we see the outlooks of the banks. That's why the market's going to react to it. So you have to be ready for this no matter what. To add on to this, for tomorrow at 7 o'clock a.m. Pacific time, or if you're on the East Coast at about 10 o'clock a.m., we have the Michigan Consumer Sentiment Report and the 5-year inflationary expectations data coming out. This could lead to a little bit more volatility. I don't think it's going to be as significant as the bank earnings, but it's worth noting. We are expecting a low inflation rate, and there's a good chance the survey is going to suggest that looking at the current CPI data. So this is just worth noting. At about 10 o'clock a.m., we could see more volatility. But besides that, the biggest thing is going to be these bank earnings causing more volatility overall before the market opens. For Tesla, we had some news that came out. Let me just close this ad. Basically said that Tesla said that it's planning on making a $24,000 EV at the new factory in India. Once again, there's been a lot of talk about the Indian Gigafactory. If that's the case, that's going to be very bullish for them with a potential annual capacity of up to 500,000 cars. Once again, very bullish stuff if this ends up happening. And for now, we're just waiting for lots of reports and lots of talks and negotiations, but it's looking good so far. And Tesla's very open-minded when it comes to this. There's also talk about how the EV prices are collapsing, and Tesla is the reason why. I mean, the media is going to blame Tesla, of course, but it's not just because of Tesla. Tesla did what it had to do to maintain a high amount of demand, to maintain its goals. And we have to see things like this happen during times of high interest and when we get very close to a recessionary stage, because this is what happens during times like this when car prices start falling. And this is part of what the Fed was basically going to have to cause, basically, right? It's not necessarily just because of Tesla. It has more to do with the macroeconomic factors that led Tesla to making the moves it did. I wouldn't necessarily attack Tesla for it. They did what they had to do, and many companies had to follow that trend. It's not just because of Tesla. We should not just blame them like many of these articles are trying to do. It has to do with the entire market and the more macroeconomic situation. To add on to this, the Model Y registrations are surging in the USA according to a study. That is some more bullish news. We were first seeing news saying that in China, the EV sales are going down and this and that. But now we're starting to see data from Experian that's showing that the EV cars are now making up about 7% of the new registrations for the first 5 months, and they're actually up quite a bit compared to the previous couple of months. So it's a very, very big increase. We saw a lot of big increases for the Model Y, and once again, we're starting to see more again for this month so far. So here in the USA, that's a pretty good sign. And once again, I hope this continues moving forward. Looking at the current inventory levels for Tesla, the Model X has a big increase, which is not that great, but everything else is still pretty low. So I hope it maintains levels like this. If they keep going up too much, this would make me very concerned because Tesla may start to cut prices again or do something very different. Is there a guarantee? Not necessarily, but I just want to note that it could be concerning moving forward if it does maintain this trend. So we want to see Model X is getting sold at a faster rate. And for now, we'll just wait and see. What is good about Tesla, however, is volume is starting to go up. The average volume was 145 million. But here's the thing. It used to be at about 90 million 2 days ago, 98 million yesterday, and today it was at 112 million. So volume is starting to come back in, more aggressive buying is starting to increase. That's a good sign for Tesla as well. To add on to this, the short volume percentage relative to price is starting to drop a bit, which tells us that overall, we're starting to see a higher percentage of the buyers relative to sellers coming into Tesla. That's very coincidental because we saw a big surge in the short interest as we started to see more sellers happening to come by as we saw lots of negative pieces of news being said about Tesla. Very interesting coincidence, but for now, it doesn't matter as much. Now, the price price ratio is starting to go up for Tesla, which is a pretty good sign because we're starting to see Tesla outperform the market again, and Tesla's gaining more relative strength as buyers are once again returning. Many analysts, such as Citigroup, are becoming more neutral on Tesla, saying it's going to perform very similar to the markets. That's better than them saying to sell Tesla shares like they did beforehand. That's a good sign for Tesla once again. We're starting to see more and more improving price action. Fridays tend to be decent days for Tesla. They're only green about 49% of the time, kind of in the middle, but we will see what happens tomorrow. If Tesla could get some kind of squeeze, that's going to be dictated by the bank earnings and other factors. To add on to this, July tends to be a little bit weaker than June, and just remember we have earnings in just a couple of days, so that's going to determine how Tesla does for the remainder of July, starting not next Wednesday, basically next Wednesday, about a week from now. So that's going to be very important. And then to add on to this, for the second and fourth hours of the trading day, Tesla tends to do very well. So we're going to be watching that as well during the fourth hour. We saw a big decrease in Tesla's short interest just a couple of days ago, so we start to see some shorts cover, and that's part of why Tesla was holding up a lot better because short covering before big events tends to lead to more upside, and we saw a lot of short covering in this market as of recent after looking at the CPI numbers. So now when it comes to Tesla, let's talk about what the trend is telling us. Well, when you zoom out, Tesla's looking quite decent. A very strong uptrend is still present, and even the downside we saw was completely healthy. It wasn't really that significant compared to how much upside we got over the last couple of months. So Tesla's still in a very good place. But here's the thing about Tesla. Tomorrow specifically is going to be harder to predict because it depends on the bank earnings. But going into next week, that's when things are going to change. I want to make that as clear as possible. So for these banks, let me just remind you one more thing before I talk about the charts. If we get good earnings, that's going to mean that we have earnings basically beating expectations and simultaneously some strong guidance. We want to see that. That's what the market wants. That's going to help the market pump if we end up getting that, most likely. If the opposite happens, if we get weak earnings, or if earnings are just kind of like decent, but guidance is weak, if they tell us that for the next year, for the next few months, they may not have strong earnings because of the recession and something like that, the market could slow down. So that's going to impact the entire market, especially for Tesla. If we get strong earnings, I'm referring to, once again, good guidance and strong reports, Tesla's going to try to pump, in my opinion, to 280. If it breaks that, we could see 285 for tomorrow. If we get bad earnings for tomorrow by the banks, if things are not good, If something bad happens, if they say that a recession is coming, this and that, we're going to likely see Tesla come all the way back down to 275, if not all the way down to 272 if it breaks below 274, right? So I'm kind of in the middle for tomorrow specifically, but it does not matter to me. If it pumps, that's going to be awesome. Like, I would love to see 285 on Tesla. I think there's a good chance that from a technical standpoint, it looks bullish. So the odds do favor Tesla holding up nicely and trying to pump. But here's the thing. If something bad happens and if Tesla does end up like dropping with the market, excuse me, it's going to be completely fine, because this will be a very good buying opportunity. You could start buying Tesla. Not financial advice, by the way, when I say that, but that could be a buying opportunity, because going into next week, I do anticipate some upside for Tesla. I think Tesla is going to start pumping very nicely and break well above this 280 level anyways, probably get very close to the 290s. It could still happen, maybe even higher than that. But I just want to note this is going to be an opportunity regardless of which way Tesla goes. Now, for the short term, like I said before, tomorrow it's very hard to predict. It depends on the bank earnings. For next week, I'm leaning more bullish on Tesla. I think it's going to pump very nicely, and I want everyone to be prepared for that. Now, for SPY, this is going to be much more difficult to predict than like Tesla, because it's going to depend heavily on the finance sector. Good earnings are going to send this thing up to 450. If it breaks, watch 452. Okay. And we have very strong resistance at 452.69, which is where we got historical rejections in the past. If we get some very, very bad earnings, or if guidance is weak, we're going to see SPY come all the way down to about 448. If that fails, let's watch 448.05, then 447.5 and 447. A big drop is going to come all the way down, and it could get very close to the mid for 440s basically. If we look at Apple, if we're bullish tomorrow, we get some good earnings. We're going to see Apple pump for 191. If that breaks, watch 191.7 and potentially 192.46. I think around there. If the opposite happens, we get bad earnings, Apple's going to come all the way down to 190. If that fails, let's watch 189, then 188.5, then 187.5. I'm kind of in the middle with Apple. It's very indecisive right now, just getting ready for the big earnings. So we're just going to have to wait and see at this point. Earnings from the banks also affect the entire economy, the entire stock market, because the stock market and these big companies are taking money from the banks and lending, or they're being lent out the money, right? So that's why it's very important to look at that. For the QQQ, good earnings are going to send this thing to 380. If that breaks, watch 382, then potentially 384 to 385, excuse me. And if we break below that, you're going to be watching 377. If that fails us, watch 377 fail, and it's going to come all the way down to like 375 or so. I'm in the middle with the QQQ, so it's just worth noting. For Nvda, I know a lot of people want to learn about this one. So just to be safe, okay, if we do get a rug pull tomorrow, we could see it retest about 460 and then like 455. If we get a good, very, very good bank earnings, it's going to go all the way up to at least 470 plus. However, let's zoom out for 1 second. Let's just not try to be unbiased. Let's talk about what this trend is telling us. When it comes to this, okay, this is looking very bullish, however. Looks very, very bullish. Bad earnings could slow it down a little bit, but there's a good chance it's going to try to keep going. And it looks like it's going to try to get to the 470s, in my opinion. It looks very bullish from a technical standpoint. It looks like we're going to be seeing this thing get very close to 475 in the near-term future. Very, very strong trend, good volume. Lots of buyers are still stepping in. So it does look more bullish than bearish, but don't forget that the banks will affect it. As long as the banks don't cause this thing to slow down, there's a good chance it's going to keep going and trying to make its way up into the 470s to 475 or so. So it looks more bullish, right? I am leaning more bullish on it, but just to be safe, you have to watch those earnings, which will still have a big effect on it. For Microsoft, if you're bullish on Microsoft, you want to see this thing break above 434. If it does so, you're going to be watching it make its way up to about 4. Did I say 4? Sorry, 3. Basically 344 is basically what you're going to be watching as resistance. If it breaks that, watch 345 plus. If that ends up breaking, watch 347 on Microsoft. If it breaks down, you're going to be watching it come all the way down to 336. If that fails this, it's going to come all the way down to about 332. Where am I leaning towards? I'm in the middle with Microsoft. It is looking more bullish from a technical standpoint. I mentioned this yesterday, but it has this unfilled gap down here. So I'm a little bit concerned about that. But besides that, it could be forming like a cup and handle. Maybe it comes down a bit and then starts pushing up even more. That could be what it's forming, or it could be the complete opposite. So there are both bullish and bearish like situations you could be looking at. It all depends on the earnings for tomorrow from the big banks. They're going to be very impactful. So I'm still in the middle. I'm open to any possibility just to be safe. For AMD, the bulls want to see this thing make its way up above 116.5. If that breaks, watch 117.6, then potentially 118, which is where we have the imbalance way up here. This is imbalance up here. It could come all the way up to this level if we get a very, very nice move. So we have this imbalance. If we get to the 118s, that's going to be very, very nice to see, but we have to break 117 first. If we're bearish, you're going to be watching this thing come all the way down below 115 and retest 113.8. That fails us, watch 112, then 109 and 107. What do I think is more likely? Well, I'm kind of in the middle because it depends on the bank earnings, but I am leaning a little bit more bullish looking at this trend. It's looking quite strong from the 4-hour time frame. The odds do favor upside just looking at this trend alone. For Netflix, if you're bullish, you want to see this thing break above 450 and excuse me, sorry guys, I do apologize. You're going to see this thing break all the way up to like 455. If that ends up breaking, it could make its way up to about 460. If that fails us, it's going to come all the way down to about 448. If that fails us, watch 445 and potentially 440. I'm still in the middle with Netflix. It really depends on these big bank earnings. Anything could really go at this point, but it is looking more bullish from a technical standpoint. It looks like it wants to get up to 455. The NASDAQ, this is looking pretty nice so far. If we're bullish, watch 14,250 plus to be broken. If we're bearish, watch your break below the 5 EMA at about 14,000. A break below that, it's going to start filling these gaps and get closer to 13,900. I'm in the middle. It all depends on the earnings at this point. It's very hard to project. I'm very much in the middle for SPX too. I mean, there could be a rejection candle forming here, but not a guarantee on the 4-hour. On the daily, it's still looking strong, so we're not really seeing much confirmation just yet. But I would say this, if we get good earnings, I'm going to be watching this thing break all the way up to about 45.50 is very possible if we get a very strong amount of earnings. If earnings are bad, watch the 5 EMA at this 44.80 level. If that fails, it's going to start filling these gaps and get to the mid 4400s. Last but not least, for Coinbase, this thing is looking strong, very, very strong right now. Now, I want to just add that we started to see this thing squeeze after the SEC settlement. In my opinion, okay, if you're bearish on Coinbase, which I don't really think the odds favor, but just to be safe because of these earnings, you're going to be watching supports at like 107, 106, 104, 102.5, and 100. I don't think it's going to drop that hard. Just to be safe, though, we want to be open-minded. It looks very strong. We saw lots of buyers stepping in. It has a bullish triangle developing. The odds do favor it making its way up to 114, 116, then 120 above those resistance levels. And if it breaks 120, it's going to go up to 125. What do I think is going to happen? Well, I'm always open-minded. I always like to be open-minded because of these big earnings. But in my opinion, from a technical standpoint, this thing is up over 24%. When you see a stock up that big, it tends to have lots of momentum for the next day too. There's a good chance it's going to push for 114 at least and try to keep going to 116 to 120. I think I'm leaning more bullish on Coinbase, but just to be safe, watch out for the bank earnings. They may affect it early on. Now, for Google, it's looking bullish too. If it breaks 125, we're going to be watching this thing make its way up to 127. If it breaks below 124, however, it's going to come down to 123.17, 122, then potentially 120 and 119. It's looking more bullish from a technical standpoint. There is a bearish divergence that started developing right here, though. But overall, it still is holding up quite nicely, so there's no guarantees. It is looking like it's going to try to go up to 127, but just to be safe, watch for the bank earnings. They could cause either direction, but it is looking a little bit more bullish just to be safe for now. Amazon also looks more bullish. If we get the bullish case, we're going to be watching 136. If we're bearish, we're going to be watching it come down to 133, 132.6, 131.7, and then potentially 130. Where am I leaning towards? I'm leaning more bullish on Amazon, seeing how it's holding up, but just to be safe, it depends on the bank earnings. I can't really predict that. That's a very, very big unknown catalyst for me. I don't know what's going to happen. It is looking more bullish from a technical standpoint, but just to be safe, it's always important to be open-minded nonetheless. For Meta, this is pretty decent and very interesting. I told you guys in the morning I was anticipating some downside for Meta, and look at how this thing moved. It got this big drop all the way down to about 310, but then we saw the buyers come back, and overall it closed just barely up about 1.32%. If we get a bad piece of earnings, it's going to come down to about 310. If 312 fails us, watch 310, 309, and then 307. If we get some good earnings tomorrow, this thing could push for 316. If it breaks that, first, we have resistance at 315, of course, as well. So there's 315 and 316. Break those resistance levels. It's going to go all the way up for 320. And if that breaks, 325, 331 are going to come. I am in the middle with it. I think I'm not sure about tomorrow specifically because it could go either way, but I am leaning more bullish because of the bigger trend. So this is like more for like next week and the next few weeks. It is still looking very strong from a technical standpoint. I would presume this for tomorrow. I'm not sure which direction it goes in. If it pumps more, that's great. If it drops more, it could always pump more later. I think it's going to pump eventually. Eventually, it's going to pump up to 320 plus to fill the gap. I don't know if it's going to drop first tomorrow and then pump later on, or if it's just going to pump from here. It's got to be one of those two. I'm still leaning more bullish on Meta overall, but it could drop a little bit tomorrow depending on the bank earnings before starting to rebound. That's how I would look at it. All right. So that's what I'm seeing for Meta, and that's what I'm seeing for Tesla. For Tesla, tomorrow is very difficult to predict. It depends on the bank earnings. I don't know what's going to happen. That's why I was kind of leaning in either direction for Tesla. But from a technical standpoint, it is looking quite strong right now. However, tomorrow does not matter as much. If it drops, I'm going to be happy because that's a good buying opportunity for next week when Tesla most likely starts pumping, approaching earnings. But once again, right, if it starts pumping already, then that's going to be an early bird run for Tesla, and that's going to be great as well anyways. And Tesla will have a better chance of pumping even higher if we already start pumping tomorrow for that 285 level. Okay, so thank you all for listening. If we get strong bank earnings and Tesla pumps, watch 280, 282, and potentially 285 to be tested, if not higher. If we get very bad earnings tomorrow, Tesla's going to come down to 275 and then 272. If it does drop, that could be a potential buying opportunity because of some very, very bullish looking technicals for as we approach earnings. And that's what historically happens as volume is starting to increase again. All right, guys. So I'm in the middle of a Tesla. From a technical standpoint, I am more bullish for the next couple of trading days going into next week. I am still more bullish, but I'm not as sure about how we're going to open tomorrow depending on the bank earnings. That's very important. So please be well aware of that. All right. Thank you for listening. Have a great day, everyone. Tesla to the moon. The long term is still incredibly bright. And peace out.